we now know that the brain is not hardwired. You don't have to live with the brain you were dealt. You
Hmm.
can change. It can be plastic. You can fundamentally change the way and improve the way the brain functions. It can reorganize. If we feed it negative stimulus, like memories and words like, "Oh, I can never heal this. This is never going to get better," we're
Yeah.
going to get a negative result. But if we feed it positive stimulus, like holosync, then we start to kind of cause that fitness process to be triggered, I guess I could say, to
Right.
change, to reorganize and grow.
This is Doctor Talks.
Our next expert guest is somebody that I've been looking forward to this interview because I want to learn more about what he does and what his company, Centerpointe, does. I'm very familiar with the company. I knew Bill Harris, the founder of the company. I've used the Holosync meditation for many, many years, but today I get behind the scenes with him and really figure out what's going on behind the scenes. So, Mark is a lifelong student of the therapeutic power of sound and music, and he's always had a passion for helping other people. And for over 25 years now, so you go way back into Centerpointe's history, you have been part of the company. And what I find most interesting is you're the chief product designer. So all these amazing products that have been created through Centerpointe, like Holosync, the trauma suite, I think getting rid of pain, I think is one of them. I mean, so many cool things you've had your hand in, and you've been developing these products for a long, long time. So you're an expert in neuro-audio technologies and how to use meditation to reduce stress. Mark, it's really great to have you here. Thanks for being on with us today.
It's a pleasure, Tom. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. So I found out about Holosync because I was in a group with Bill Harris, the founder of Holosync, called the Transformational Leadership Council. And actually, no, I found out about it before that. Somebody had gotten Holosync, a friend of mine from the corporate world, and they're like, I never was able to meditate, and this enabled me to meditate. So give us some of the background of Centerpointe and particularly maybe start with Holosync, because I think that was the first product, right?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I never really thought about it that way, but it really was the first product.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, Bill had been experimenting with all kinds of meditation, from his youth, into the 1980s.
Yeah.
And he had been experimenting with something called binaural beat entrainment, which maybe
Yeah.
a lot of the audience members will recognize. But he recognized, both the power of that technology and also some of the limitations of it.
Mm.
And without putting too fine a point on it, the main limitation is that it does create benefit. It generates benefit in the moment, but it really doesn't create the long-term changes that Bill was looking for.
Mm.
So to, kind of take this from a big picture standpoint to start with, because everything for us here at Centerpointe revolves around holosync. There is no Centerpointe. There is no trauma suite. There is, none of these products without this core technology.
Right.
So holosync is really a form of what we call neuro-audio technology, which is basically just, you can think of it as sound that affects the brain. It can take you, the basis, as I said, is binaural beat entrainment.
Okay.
And so that alters brainwave states. So it can take you to or through virtually any brainwave pattern and therefore virtually any state of consciousness.
Right.
And I think one of the cool things about it that sometimes people don't tune into necessarily immediately is that it's totally non-invasive. There's no drugs,
Yeah.
there's no magic, spells. There's just sound. But holosync is a very refined version of that technology. So one of the things real quickly that sets it apart from other types of binaural beat entrainment is that it actually replicates the benefits of long-term mindfulness meditation. And you were talking about, I have been at Centerpointe for quite a while, since
Yeah.
1996.
Yeah.
And, back in that time, mindfulness meditation was kind of new agey, and not in a good way, I guess, something that, old monks and mystics were doing way up high in the Himalayas or something.
Hmm.
But today, we've got all this new science that
Yeah.
backs up the power of mindfulness. And so you see these practices now that used to be really esoteric, and they're being taught in boardrooms, they're being taught in the military, they're
Yeah.
being practiced by professional athletes because it helps so much with focus, with calming this, stress, with boosting creative performance, and just a ton more. So when you have something like HoloSync, which makes meditating easier and way faster, you're talking about a really transformational tool. But one more thing, and this is kind of what I think you were getting at earlier, is that HoloSync is really in a different class of even binaural beat entrainment
Right.
because it's what we call a neural driver. So what's that? It's something that uses low carrier frequencies, and I'll kind of skip the sciencey part of it. But these low carrier frequencies can saturate or drive the nervous system and cause the system and the brain to reorganize itself and grow. So the kinds of benefits that I think you've experienced that everybody who's been using HoloSync over the last 30 years of reduction in stress and feelings of depression and anxiety, the improvements in memory and focus and concentration, the increase in mental and emotional resilience, which to me is big. And then of course the other really biggie is the release of old trauma and mental and emotional material.
Yeah, and I wanna get into that too, because that's really interesting. We'll get into that in just a little bit later. But you said it makes getting into a meditative state easier and faster for people.
Mhm.
Explain that. Like, because some people do struggle with it, right? Their mind's super busy,
Yeah.
and then they try to meditate, and it didn't work, and then "I can't meditate." This
Yeah.
actually helps you meditate, even those people with the super busy minds, by using this, they're able to go deeper
Yes.
to meditations and get there a lot quicker. But
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you said it perfectly. It is first and foremost really a meditation tool. Now, I will say that it doesn't really matter to us if somebody picks up HoloSync and uses it and thinks of it as meditation, because
Right.
for some people there's a distinction. But unfortunately, that distinction for a lot of people is that meditation's hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy because you're taught in conventional meditation to kind of sit down and clear your mind and not think about anything and get into and the expectations of meditation are high. You're supposed to have something kind of magical happen while you're
Yeah.
sitting there with your eyes closed. And that's really, if you talk to somebody who's really a truly long-term meditator,
Mhm.
that's not what happens most. I mean, it can, but
Yeah.
it doesn't usually happen that way. So because HoloSync does the work for you
Mhm.
of getting you into these deep meditative states, your job is to just put the headphones on and push play and listen and get out of the way of the process and just let things unfold naturally. So
Yeah.
you don't have to clear your mind. I mean, your brain's built to think thoughts, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what it's doing all the time, whether or not you're really consciously aware of it. So with holosync, for example, you don't have to clear your mind. If thoughts and stuff come up, what we tell people to do is just watch it. Just like
Mhm.
sitting next to a stream that's flowing by. You may be very aware of the sound of that water flowing by at first, but the longer you sit there and don't fight with it and don't try and
Yeah.
stop it, the more that just blends into the ambient environment, so to speak, and you kind of merge, without getting too cosmic, you sort of merge with that feeling, and we've all had that sensation. You sit there and you get used to the sound, and pretty soon it's pleasant and it's part of your environment. So it's just, it makes it pleasurable, it makes it easier. But again, most importantly, it speeds up the benefits. Most people don't have 30, 40, 50 years to do 10,000, 15,000 hours of meditation to
Yeah.
get the benefits. And so
Right.
that's what really motivated Bill to work so hard for so long to create HoloSync and the HoloSync Solution Program, which is our core program.
Yeah. And when we're listening to Holosync, explain to people what we're listening to, right? Because there's different tones, and I love the one with the ocean sounds because
Yeah.
usually I have like well, I'm talking about more in the suites, that you have. You can to it without the ocean sound, where it has, different sounds or the ocean sound. To me, just the ocean sounds, I've always liked water. And so you can pick that. But what's going on behind that? What are these tones and sounds and things doing? And then there's even some embedded in some of your programs, some embedded affirmations that you can
Right.
either hear out loud or you are they're more subliminal. So what's going on underneath this that makes it so powerful?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, it's interesting and it was seem kind of complicated. On another way of looking at it, it's actually really simple. I mean, we are, after all, talking about two distinct tones.
Yeah.
So what's really fundamentally happening, and then if you want me to kind of drill down a little bit more, I can. But we know that the brain operates in sort of a neuroelectrical manner. As we're sitting here talking, there are these microvoltage
Yeah.
neuroelectrical fluctuations happening in our brains all the time, 24/7. And we can measure the frequency or the rate at which those impulses are occurring. So if they're happening roughly between, say, about 8 and 12 cycles per second, or 8 and 12 hertz, and I'm just picking
Right.
an example,
Yeah.
well, that means you're generating a lot of alpha waves. So alpha is one of the 4 or 5 main brainwave patterns. In
Yeah.
this case, alpha is associated with light relaxation, heightened focus. Some people call it the super learning state. Back in college, we used to call it the 2 beer state.
Yeah.
It just, you're kind of just relaxed and you're sitting back and you're getting into a very pleasant state of consciousness. Well,
Yeah.
if we play a tone, and let's just pick a number, let's just say 220 hertz, and we play that to the right ear, and then we pick a tone that's slightly different, let's say 230 hertz, so we play that into the left ear. What the brain does, and this was established initially by a paper by Dr. Gerald Oster back in 1973. You can look that up if you
Yeah.
like, but he was really one of the first to publish a paper describing what he called the frequency following response. So Oster said, look, if you play this 220, 230, or either way, the brain does something really cool. It takes those two tones and it synthesizes them, and it creates a third phantom tone or harmonic based on the difference,
Hmm.
or what we call a beat frequency. That's where the beat in binaural beat comes from.
Yeah.
So everyone knows the difference between 220 and 230. That gives you a 10 hertz signal. It's a
Mhm.
standing wave formed right in the middle of the brain, in the brain stem. And the brain essentially entrains or locks into that stimulus.
Which is
And
now 10.
exactly, it's right
Yeah.
in the middle of alpha. So
Yeah.
that, in a nutshell, is how binaural beat works. The
Huh?
one
I didn't know
character.
that. So I just learned something. I
Okay,
thought
good.
playing at 10 hertz and that just synced, but it actually the brain is creating the difference. And then that's what wow, that's
That's
really
right. Yeah, each side of the brain has its own hearing center and processes sounds differently. And there's some fascinating reasons why that is, in terms of how we spatialize and locate sounds in our environment.
yeah,
But the bottom line is that we can take advantage of this frequency following response that Dr. Oster described back in 1973, and use binaural beat entrainment, use entrainment to go to or through any of these states. So when this first came out, of course, you had people, probably before Bill a little bit, but they were saying, "You mean to tell me we can get into a sleep state, we can
yeah,
combat jet lag, we can get energized without
yeah,
drugs," okay, which a lot of people were using recreationally and otherwise
yeah,
in the '70s to expand their consciousness, to alter their states? And
right.
the answer is yes. So ever since then, this little industry has kind of sprung up, and I like to think Centerpoint's always been at the forefront of that since Bill
Yeah,
started it back in 1989. And we're always trying to refine it, improve it, explore it, discover what it can do. And with about 2 million people around the world who've used it, that is
yeah,
a huge body, of data that we can draw from. Some of it's, obviously a lot of it's anecdotal, but it's a lot of data that tells us a lot of things about how this technology works.
yeah. No, it's a phenomenal program, Holosync. And again, I've had it for years and yeah, you really feel the power of it when you use
Yeah, good. Yeah.
get into a nice alpha state, or deep state really quickly. And it just like you said, it accelerates your ability now to just experience that state and the benefits that brings without having to do 10,000 hours or however many hours it takes normally to get there. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to add one thing because you're
Yeah,
exactly right. But just to make this distinction, because this is kind of, in my mind, this is the coolest part, right?
yeah,
It really is like exercise for the brain, because
yeah,
we don't just pull you into that deep state. We saturate the nervous system with enough stimulus because we use very low carrier frequencies to do it. So when you do that, it means that you're kind of, a good thing is, like, to talk a little bit about exercise. When you work out, right, you're giving your body more stimulus than it's used to handling. You're
yeah,
weightlifting or you're running or you're cycling or something like that.
yeah,
And if you do that consistently enough, you're going to see benefits. You're going to see gains, right? But you also lose something when you exercise, right? If you're a little bit pudgy around the middle, right? I mean, you're a little out of shape, you burn off the excess fat. So, I mean, I think that's key too, because in our frame of reference, a lot of people have things like trauma, they have old unresolved mental and emotional material. That is the kind of fat, mentally and emotionally speaking, that we need to burn off. So the appeal to holosync is, as we've been talking about, the benefits of mindfulness meditation, just making it a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it also absolutely changes the actual functioning. It causes the brain to reorganize and heal and release so much of that old stuff. So to
Yeah.
me, that's one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, and a couple of this being the Global Energy Healing Summit, the Holy Sync program is amazing, right? Because it'll get people down into a state where they're in their parasympathetic, the healing response can really start to work, right? But you have all sorts of cool suites, and two in particular, I think, would be really important for people to know about. One is the trauma
Oh yeah,
uh, sweet. And then the other one is the one around getting, relieving pain.
yeah.
So talk to us, like, how can listening to tones and sounds, how can that go in and start to dig out traumas that have been in people's minds for years and years and years?
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? And this is where Holosync is really effective. And pretty much all of us, obviously, are going to experience some kind of trauma in our lives, or we certainly already have. But for about 60% of us, a lot of that trauma really stems from our childhood. So
Mhm.
we know there's trauma from experiences like physical abuse or sexual abuse or
Yeah,
emotional abuse or PTSD. But, we can also suffer trauma from neglect, from the sudden loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, poverty, community or family violence,
sure.
war, which we're seeing, natural disasters. In fact, you might find this interesting. You probably know this already, but psychologists have been reporting a real uptick in trauma-like cases among patients in the wake of COVID,
Sure.
which makes sense, right?
And a lot in physicians, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
physicians, actually, physicians are, one of the occupations most likely to experience trauma. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of that happened with COVID, but just the stress that they encounter every day, even without COVID, right? Is there, and a friend of mine, Dr. Cheng Ron, just gave me that statistic, which I didn't know, but they're 75% more likely to experience
Mm,
trauma,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even tougher because it's occupational, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily tougher, but it's striking. I mean, they're just doing their jobs and they're exposed
Yeah.
to so much. And with COVID, I mean, not only do you have the doctors and the nurses just, obviously just working to the bone to respond
Yeah.
to this pandemic, but then of course you've got, people losing loved ones, losing jobs, losing contact and connection with friends. I mean, my dad, on a personal note, he was in hospice for over 2 years, and this is right during COVID. So even though he was only an hour away,
Yeah.
I really didn't get a chance to see him and spend as
Yeah.
much time with him as I wanted to. Now, that wasn't traumatic per se, but I will tell you that it wasn't easy.
Right.
And I think a lot of people had those kinds of situations. But
Sure.
whether you've endured trauma as a child or as an adult, I think that we all know that trauma goes way beyond the experience itself. So,
Yeah.
one other thing I'll say about this is just that I think it's important. I am not a doctor, I'm not a mental health professional, but I've been watching thousands of people cope with their trauma in different ways and getting benefit from Holosync, which we'll continue to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's important to know, I think, that we can't just water down or erase memories of the past and think that we've dealt with the trauma. We have to address the impact the trauma is having on our lives today, even if it happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. So you asked about holosync. I can jump into
Yeah,
that if
and
you.
so it will no, has so how does it work in terms of helping us with trauma? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on when we listen to, and the trauma suite has several tracks that you can listen to, recordings you can
Yes.
listen to, and they all have specific purposes. And by the way, we'll announce later, you're giving as a gift one of the tracks from
I
that.
am. Yeah. Spoiler alert. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk about that. I don't know if I'll have time to talk about every one of the tracks, but I'll certainly talk about some of
No,
them.
we don't need to
Um,
talk about all the tracks, but
yeah.
maybe the mechanism, like
Oh,
what's
sure.
on, and when we listen to this, where all
Great
this
question. Yeah.
starts to dissolve traumas.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mentioned neural saturation a few minutes
Yeah.
ago, that neural driving property that holosync has. And we talked about exercise. And so when we exercise, we're causing the body to change and grow. We talked about the fact that the mental and emotional equivalent of losing excess fat is that unresolved mental and emotional material.
Mhm.
So again, holosync is pushing that brain, right? It's flushing out that old stuff. And what happens as people continue to listen to it is the brain reaches a certain threshold for what it can handle. So there's a cumulative effect to listening to holosync consistently. And,
Mhm.
people sometimes get and say, well, what if I miss a day? Hey, that's no big deal. We're all human. We're all going to miss a day. But that consistency really generates the changes because it causes the system to reach that point where it says, look, if you're going to keep feeding me this tough stimulus every day, we got to get rid of some of this old stuff that's been holding us back, holding us down for years.
Yeah.
So it builds resilience in that process. And to me, this is key because people who've experienced trauma, of course, know this instinctively, but trauma lowers our capacity, our threshold for handling stress, right?
Yeah.
So with holosync, you're not just meditating the trauma away. You're actually reconditioning the brain. You're conditioning the nervous system to become a lot more resilient. And this is
Yeah.
particularly important, I think, with what we call silent trauma, okay, which is repressed trauma. And you might find this interesting because people, and I'm sure people like this, and it's so difficult to watch, but people live lives riddled with depression and anxiety and poor self-esteem, and they live that way for so long that they just kind of assume that's life. That's just how
Yeah.
things are going to be. It'll never change. But
Right.
we have to call that out as a myth because I think it's a really dangerous one. Living that way shouldn't be the norm. And,
Mhm.
we talked about kind of neuroplasticity. We touched on that a little bit. We now know that the brain is not hardwired. You don't have to live with the brain you were dealt. You
Mhm.
can change. It can be plastic. You can fundamentally change the way and improve the way the brain functions. It can reorganize.
Yes.
So when if we feed it negative stimulus, like memories and words like, "Oh, I can never heal this. This is never going to get better," we're
Yeah.
going to get a negative result. But if we feed it positive stimulus, like holosync, then we start to kind of cause that fitness process to be triggered, I guess I could say, to
Right.
change, to reorganize and grow. And as you know, Tom, I mean, I've seen you talk about this a little bit before. Everything good in life, everything starts with a better brain. Brain health is key to virtually it all starts there. If you can improve your brain health, there's a correlative improvement in every other part of your life.
Yeah.
So when we get to this, if you want me to jump ahead a little bit, there is one thing that kind of occurs to me. Yeah, I saw a video of you actually, Tom. You were talking about stories and how they can limit us sometimes.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about how true that was with trauma. And I
Mhm.
think you said something like, we get addicted to stories. And I think you were talking about that more in terms of a sense of self and success in the way you're running your business.
Yeah.
But I think it applies to this as well because when trauma is so much a part of our story, we got to be careful not to get addicted to that
Absolutely.
and tell the story over
Part
and
of
over.
Yeah, and part of what you need to do, right, is
Yeah,
you need to have a better story, but if you put a better story on top of a crappy foundation where
yeah,
the trauma is, it's not gonna have it's not gonna be able to grow from that. So, in my book, The Breakthrough Code, I talk about, letting go of your old baggage, which is exactly what
yeah,
Holosync allows you to do. It makes it easier just for the mind to release it and let it go. And now you're better able to take on this and more empowering story.
yeah. And so this is what we found out when we were beginning to build this suite because we're spending 30 plus years watching people heal trauma. And then we go, okay, we have plenty of data now. Let's create something
Yeah,
that's zeroes in on this. And so we created the total trauma relief suite. And
right.
what we discovered is that most trauma is truly repressed. I don't mean just ignored, okay, but packed away, stored deeply in the unconscious, out of the way of your conscious awareness. So it sort of gets tamped down. Did
Right? Yeah, you were a kid. You were,
Yeah,
2
oh
years
yeah.
old. You don't remember everything from 2 years old. Yeah.
Well, you certainly don't have the skills to
Yeah.
process that. I mean, but even as adults, we don't always have that. And in fact, that's a good point I wanted to talk about too, because repressing uncomfortable thoughts and memories is not abnormal or wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I emphasize that because sometimes people kind of talk about that like they're ashamed of it, or that that's some kind of weakness or a character flaw.
It's a
That's for
mechanism. It's a
it's
coping mechanism.
absolutely a coping
Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah, but it traps energy.
It
And then
does.
and then with that energy trapped, you can't move forward.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like boxing up that toxic waste, hauling it in the basement, thinking
Yeah,
you're done, and then you wonder why you're still kind of sick or you don't feel
yeah,
well. It's because you're
yeah.
living a little with this toxic waste. So it
Mhm.
affects every part of our lives. But what we found out that's cool, I think is cool because
Yeah.
I geek out about this stuff, is that, we've been working, we talked about alpha brainwave patterns.
Mhm,
Beneath that, we have theta brainwave
mhm.
patterns. And beneath that still, we have delta brainwave
Yep.
patterns. And delta is commonly associated with very deep sleep, very deep meditative states. But recently, and this is something not many people know, there's been this interest in a subset of delta waves called epsilon waves. Now, frankly, not a lot's known about these exceptionally deep brainwave states just yet because they're quite hard to detect
Yeah.
and to measure. But we're talking extremely slow, deep brainwave patterns below 1 cycle per second.
Wow.
And while we're still learning about these very low brainwave states, it's believed that they come from the deepest parts of the brain, the parts that are kind of like a storage locker for
Mm.
that old repressed trauma. What do you want to do when you repress the stuff that you don't want to have to face or deal with? You don't know how to face or deal with. You get it as far away from your conscious awareness as possible. That we think is epsilon. So with
Okay.
this suite that I mentioned, the total trauma relief suite, we actually used holosync on one of the soundtracks to target these epsilon waves and access these very deep states of consciousness. And then, of course, we also have the track that we'd like to give away to people today, which is really focused on that resilience, that neural driving piece. So, I mean, when you add all
What's the
this
name of
up,
that track? What's the name of that track, Mark?
that's called radiant resilience.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and before we're finished,
Yeah.
go remind me, I'll go ahead and hand a link out so people can check that out.
Yeah.
But ever since we released this suite late last year, people are getting loads of this old negative stuff coming up and flushing itself out. And it's like a massive weight has really been lifted on their shoulders. So,
Yeah.
by the way, even if you don't have a lot of trauma, I'm fortunate. I mean, I had a pretty good childhood growing up,
Yeah.
but we all have difficult emotional things too.
Sure.
And so getting into these really super deep brainwave states is really powerful and transformative, and it'll absolutely revolutionize your meditation practice, if nothing else.
That's awesome. Hey, let's give out that link now
Yeah.
and
Okay.
because I know everyone's like, "All right, you said you're gonna give me what is it?"
Right.
So,
Okay.
how do they get this,
So
this track that, is part of the trauma suite, Mark?
yeah, the Radiant Resilience track is yours free as a thank you, as a free gift. If you just want to experience HoloSync, if you want to experience what it can do in terms of the neural driving effects, I'm going to give you this link. I think it might appear elsewhere, but I'll give it to you now. It's myholosync.com.
And then let's spell so MY and then
Yeah,
Holosync is HOLOSYNC.
correct. So
Dot yeah.
you got it, myholosync.com/, and this is all one word too, of course, Healing Summit Mark. They decided to put my name on it. So it's MARC. So it's Healing Summit, HEALING SUMMIT, MARC.
Yeah.
And if you visit that link, you'll be able to sign up. Use that today. And by the way, I mean, at Centerpointe, we're huge on feedback. So even if you're not a long-time participant in the program, it's the first time you've ever heard of us, who are these Centerpointe people? When you try it out, send us a note and let us know what you think of it. We collect that feedback. It's gold to us. So we always appreciate anybody who takes the time to tell us what they think.
Awesome. So we've got the core Holosync program, which is amazing.
Yes.
I have you have a trauma suite, and then you attack all sorts of other issues. Like there's a sleep suite, which
Yeah.
you can listen to get to sleep quicker, and then if you wake up, get back to sleep even quicker. All sorts of
Yeah.
great things. And then you've got also, I think this is the newer one is the pain. The
Well, there's chronic pain. Yeah, the one too, if we have time, I wanted to squeeze
yeah,
in because I've had so many questions come up about
yeah,
this, and I don't know if you've seen questions too, because it is related specifically to well, we call it youthful mind. I'll just get right to the point.
okay,
It's called youthful mind, and the reason we created this, it's based on some really interesting research that's been coming out. about Alzheimer's disease
Mm.
and about neurodegenerative problems and about dementia and things like that. And this research is ongoing, but we built a track, or we built a suite, I should say, um, that was based in part or inspired by that research, and it's just incredible. And I've been a real preacher about this. I've been trying to get this information out to as many people as
Yeah.
I can, for the past 7 years, because as I get older, as my family gets older, my mom gets older, and so forth, I really want to,
Huh.
be benefiting from the latest research, and this is really cool stuff.
And so what's happening with that? What's happening with the impact on the brain with that particular suite that allows us to hopefully be more resilient to dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. Back in 2016, Dr. Li Huai Tsai, and I'm so sorry if I got her name wrong. I always try and do a good job pronouncing it. But she is a fantastic researcher from MIT, and she started researching ways of treating Alzheimer's. Now, this can almost be sort of a trigger word for some people, and I completely understand why. If you know anything about Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
it's a terrible disease. It's not just something that, you know, kind of messes up your memory and makes you forget where you put your car keys, right?
Right.
It literally decimates the brain's ability to function. And I mean, on all levels. And over time, it essentially causes the brain to forget how to keep your organs functioning,
Yeah.
basically, how to keep you alive. And so, people who are familiar with it sometimes wonder why it's so deadly. And that's why it slowly kills the brain. Now, I know that sounds terrible, but that's because it is. And, if you've personally experienced Alzheimer's with a loved one,
Yeah.
you know full well that this is a serious and agonizing
Yeah.
thing. And not only that, we're not on top of this problem. Alzheimer's cases are expected to rise exponentially over the next few decades. And
Mhm.
many of us will experience it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And most of the drugs currently, anyway, are only really marginally helpful, and some of them just cost a fortune. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that scientists believe contributes to Alzheimer's disease is a buildup of a kind of plaque within the brain. It's called a beta amyloid plaque.
Mhm.
It's a sort of protein based plaque. And this plaque is a little like the same kind of plaque that forms on your teeth. It's just sticky and it's nasty stuff. Now, the brain has these kind of, they're called janitor cells, right? They're like the janitorial team that comes in at night. They're called microglia. And they come in at night usually as this plaque builds up, which it does for all of us. It is right now. These microglia cells come in and scour it out, just like we do when we brush our teeth to remove the plaque that's forming on that. So, and by the way, this is why sleep is so important, among, many other reasons, is
Yeah.
because it gives the brain a chance to do this cleansing process. But as that plaque builds up and up and up with somebody who is suffering from, the early stages of Alzheimer's, there's this cascading effect where the microglia can't keep up with the beta amyloid plaque buildup and the what are called tau tangles. And that's when you've got a real problem. But going back to Dr. Tsai's research, what they did was they started to treat mice who had lots of this brain plaque, but they didn't give them drugs. They gave them gamma exposure in the form of sound. So basically, they just played gamma waves at a frequency of 40 hertz.
Yeah. So it's a really fast wave.
It,
Uh,
it is for compared to other for brainwave patterns. It's
yeah.
it's a rather low tone, but yes, it is. So 40 hertz, and then they of course went back and looked at their brains, and they found a significant reduction in these beta amyloid plaques and
Wow.
an increase in this microglia activity. So then they added light stimulus on top of the sound, and the results were even more dramatic. And anyone can go to Professor Google and
Yeah.
research this. But my understanding is that they're now approved to do human clinical trials using the same gamma therapy. And I think this is, I mean, you think about this. This is a possible. I'm not saying it's a cure,
Yeah.
but this is a possible way to treat Alzheimer's or improve it or stave it off without any kind of drug therapy.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, because I know at least some of our folks out there listening are probably Centerpointe people, and they go, "Hey, wait a minute. I think I've got a Gamma soundtrack from you guys." And you probably do.
Yeah.
We learned about Gamma many years ago. There was a study in 2004 where a group of monks with extensive meditation practice and experience I mean, we're talking like 10,000 hours
Yeah.
or more,
Yeah.
were studied, and they were experts in practicing a form of meditation called the metta bhavana, which
Mhm.
is a very specific kind of meditation focused on unconditional loving kindness and compassion. Anyway, typically, as you might expect, when you see somebody's brainwaves as they meditate, they're going slower and slower and slower and they're dropping. But with this form of meditation, what they found was that these monks' brainwave patterns were going up. They were elevating up into this gamma range, which is
Yeah.
higher than beta, higher than the state we are in right now, in
Yep.
fact. So this was really interesting, and it showed that meditation is usually an activity of slower brainwave states, but there's a lot of benefits to gamma. So even before Dr. Sai's research and all this really exciting stuff that's now coming out, I remember Bill coming in one day and saying, "Have you read this thing about the Meta Bhavana monks?" And so we started building gamma tracks left and right and spending weeks and weeks trying them out. And we have several soundtracks. In fact, we do include one with the trauma relief suite. It's actually a bonus soundtrack called
Yeah.
Worry Reliever that
Yeah.
uses these same gamma patterns that you see there with the Metabhavana practicing monks.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, you're blowing people's minds today. All this great information. And again, I'm a huge proponent of Holosync. And actually, I, I was talking with Dr. Eric Robbins, a medical doctor that after 20, I think at least 20 years of chronic fatigue, finally has overcome that. And he's a energy healer and just an amazing doctor. But one of the core things in his arsenal to get over chronic fatigue was Holosync. So
Yeah, wow.
yeah, very powerful. And I'm so excited to expose everybody that doesn't know about it to Holosync and all the great suites that you have. Holosync is the core program, but then you've got the pain suite, get rid of pain. You have the trauma. You have the one you talked about where we can help our brains not have to face
Yes. We've got
Alzheimer's.
Youthful Mind, we've
Yeah,
got something for super learning and memory. We're coming out with a brand new one, and stay tuned, it's gonna be one of our best ones ever. But yeah, HoloSync is a very versatile technology, so we'd like to think that whatever you're dealing with, whatever challenges, or just whatever your desired outcome is, whatever your goals are, no matter
yeah,
where you are in life, this is a tool that has a place, in your toolbox, and it can make a significant difference. So
yeah.
certainly appreciate, having the chance to come on and talk about that a bit.
You bet. Great having you, Mark. Let's give that link out one more time just so everybody can remember that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's for the Radiant Resilience soundtrack from the Total Trauma Relief suite. And
yeah.
again, that link, I'll read it and then I'll spell it. It's
Okay.
myholosync.com/healing summit mark. So
Okay.
it's myholosync.com/healingSummitMarc.
Awesome. Beautiful. And that's a free gift for all of you that
That is an
Mark
absolutely free
Gilson
gift.
is giving you. Yeah. Hey, Mark, wonderful having you on. You're such an expert on this. I love talking with you. And I've learned some things, even though, I thought I knew a lot about it. You've taught me a couple things here today too. So thanks so much for being with us.
Well, likewise, Tom. I mean, you're an inspiration to a lot of people, and it's been great to get to know you and have a chance to talk. And I just appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to Doctor Talks. We hope today's episode has enlightened and inspired you on your path to optimal health. Each day is a new opportunity to make choices that empower your well-being. For more insights and strategies, subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, www.drtalks.com. Stay connected, stay healthy, and join us next time on Doctor Talks. Real talks from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.